Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Post Conference Presser for Anfield Index. It feels like a fair while ago for this, but it's good to be back in the saddle. Good to be talking everything around the press conference, although a little bit weird doing it on a Thursday, especially when the game is Super Sunday that we're going to be talking about as well. Maybe something will come out in relation to why that is. Who knows? But Arne slot went early and the accidentally for this. Plenty of questions around players. Curtis Jones was talked about. Milos Kerkez, Florian Wirtz, Virgil van Dijk was alluded to as well in his future. And of course, the new signing of Jeremy Jacquet. So as we do with Post Conference Presser, we'll look at the Q&As around for Arne slot. We'll talk about the lessons from the last game just gone, Newcastle. We'll, of course, talk about the threats that Manchester City bring, and then we'll give the lineup, score, and scorers prediction. I'm your host, Dave Davis, coming to you from, it's freezing cold up in Edinburgh. That wind, man, absolutely killer. Fingers crossed in the world, it is a little bit better wherever you are. But it's a huge game coming up for this, isn't it? When you look at the table, it is, we have a look here, second versus sixth, and we're on the wrong end of that balance. Liverpool, 1 point behind Chelsea, 2 behind Manchester United, Manchester City in second place. So they really can't afford to slip up here with a Champions League chase abound. And also, both of those clubs will play before. United at the early kickoff on Saturday. Chelsea will go before at 3 o'clock against Wolves. You expect them to win both those games. So this just feels massive, doesn't it? A must win, you could allude to. And Arne slot answered plenty of questions. He was asked a lot of questions, some good ones, to be fair, at the same time. Now, of course, the most important thing in these press conferences is always what injury news did we get? And I don't think there was really anything too unexpected. He confirmed that Joe Gomez is back, should train Saturday, and should be involved against Manchester City. Jeremy Frimpong is still unavailable, though, which I think based on his last press conference, unless you think differently, what we all expected pretty much. We also got a bit of an update around Conor Bradley, a little bit separate, but Lewis Steele had this in his confidential article. It's worth mentioning because there had been reports that Conor Bradley was out long term and you could be running into 2027. But as Lewis wrote, Conor Bradley is still hopeful of being fit for the start of the season. Next season, so I should say, he's not fully ruled out the World Cup just yet. So we'll see what develops on that. Not really, I wouldn't say negative injury news, but not really positive. A real bonus would have been if Frimpong was back, but we didn't expect it. I fully expect, going early on the lineup a bit here, Joe Gomez to be on the bench for this one. That is the early prediction. Of course, the early opening question, Liverpool did make a signing in the January window, even though Jeremy Jacquet will not come in until the summer. And Arne slot, of course, talked about him. He said, it's very pleasing. He's a very big talent and maybe even more than a talent, but we speak because of his age. We weren't the only ones interested in him, so it's a big compliment to those who are signing the players. Another example of this model we use at this club, young, talented at the start of their careers and can improve and help us for the short and definitely long term. We signed a lot of those recently and the mid to long term future is in a very good place. Does seem that way, doesn't it? Liverpool are building a younger team, and I never like the word transition, but that's how people have referred it to as certain players aging. You know who I'm talking about. There's a younger group coming in now, isn't there? You know who they are too. Wirtz, Ekitike, others like Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kerkez, Jacquet will join that group as well. Players sort of 23 and under. It is you can see what's being built. Still much work to do. Let's not get that twisted either. But a good signing and something that, fingers crossed, he gets to play in the Champions League next season. But there's now what we can do about the January window and the lack of investment in that one. Speaking of the long-term future, though, Virgil van Dijk got mentioned and asked about, quite rightly, by Arne slot around young centre-backs. He said, we know Virgil won't play for 10 years, but he's got a year left. maybe longer at us. Hopefully he can stay fit for multiple years, but this club is not stupid. We do know somewhere in the upcoming years there is life after Virgil, but that is for every position. We don't think about short term only. It is mid to long as well. I mean, Virgil will be 35, I think it is, and having just played a World Cup at the start of next season. I think you've seen the effects on him. You know, all the age just catches up with everyone. No one beats Father Time, do they? And I'd probably say he's been an exceptional centre-back this season. Not godly, as he's been in recent years. And to be fair, there has been games where, like he's admitted, the Bournemouth game, he could have done better. 3 at the back, legs around him, power around him like Jeremy Jacquet. Maybe that's the way forward. Of course, it's going to be another year of Virgil, which is great. But people, I'm just struggling to get my head around. Mo's going to leave, odds are, this summer. I want to start thinking about Van Dijk leaving as well, but Liverpool have to. And it's not going to be this summer, but the year after, very possibly. However, speaking of this summer, he got asked and talked in depth around Curtis Jones and his future. Curtis Jones, who we know is a subject of interest from Spurs, and then also Inter Milan. Didn't like that. And Arne was asked about Curtis Jones and his future during this press conference. So let's have a listen to what he said in this one.
That's, of course, why we kept him as well, because we have in that line a lot of players, but we need these midfielders in different positions as well. And the moment you start to need midfielders in different positions, then the line in midfield gets smaller and smaller. So yeah, good. Of course, we kept him, and his situation hasn't changed to us. He's one of the 16 outfield players we have available for a long term now, and also at this moment of time, with 2 really young players, with Trey and Rio included. So yeah, would be a bit strange if we would let anyone go if you only have 16 available.
Okay, a bit strange to let anyone go if you only had 16 available. Talked about Curtis as well in terms of the numbers and the options in midfield with midfielders like Szoboszlai obviously means having to play other positions. Gravenberch, of course, in the back line. So there's a few thoughts on what he said, and there was other comments from the presser as well. Just that, this is a comment. He's unlucky in the sense that midfield is the only line that we haven't had injuries. His situation hasn't changed to us. He's one of 16 outfield players available to us with 2 young players in Trey and Rio. So it would be strange if we let anyone go. And he also talked about the contract situation. He said talks are taking place in other places. The moment we have news, we share it here. We're well aware that he has 18 months left. So that is all I can say. This was not an answer of, and this isn't hammering the manager. I know the manager's not always been smart on what he said for me recently, but this wasn't an answer of, Curtis Jones has been one of our best midfield players this year, by the way, apart from Dominic Szoboszlai, because, you know, McAllister, we know he struggled. It's not been the best year for Grav. He's been really good. This is a young scouser that always, you know, takes responsibility, fronts up as well when it's not gone right. There's none of that tone, isn't there? Knowing as well with our homegrown issues, it was more of a tone. I mean, he's unlucky in the sense that the midfield is the only line when injuries haven't happened. Is that Arne Slot basically saying that if there hadn't been injuries, then Szoboszlai, Gravenberch and McAllister would have been pretty much it this season again? I'm not sure that's going to entice him too much to sign a new contract, isn't it? It was just the tone there. And even we're well aware he's got 18 months left to go. Now, on Media Matters earlier in the week, me and David Lynch were talking about it, and he was honest to say that wouldn't be surprised, actually leaning towards now Curtis Jones departing. And I'm going to be honest, you know, if you're thinking that's a good thing, bite me. I don't think it's a good thing at all that Curtis Jones might be departing. And yes, of course we're going to look for reinforcements. Adam Wharton's the obvious link, but not really happy if it's a Wharton out. Sorry, Wharton in, Curtis Jones out. I don't really think that works very well. Yeah. Just felt that it wasn't a warm sort of thing. There was no like Curtis Jones, one of my main men. He's been brilliant. Maybe quite honest there, Arne. So that was the talk around Curtis Jones. He was also asked at the same time around Milos Kerkez. Kerkez, who got an assist, didn't he, for that goal? That one against Newcastle, playing the ball down the channel where Ekitike plays the Torres regen. But it was right that he got asked a few questions on Milos Kerkez. Let's just have a listen to what he said in this one.
Hi, Arne. Not a data question for a change.
Okay.
You mentioned before the early part of the game against Newcastle didn't go as you planned. I think there were multiple times where Newcastle had counter-attacks, where they had multiple runners in behind your midfield. And if you look at the Manchester City game last night, they scored from quite a few similar situations running with fast runners like the defence. I just wonder.
You were talking about City now, how City scored and how we created our chances.
Well, yeah. So Newcastle had opportunities where they were running in behind your midfield before they scored.
This is a great example, people, of when you play the wrong clip that you wanted to, but you're going to style it out quite nicely. Because just in case you missed it or didn't hear it, he did talk about Milos Kerkez, as I said, a very good young player, and the best of him is still to come. He's already progressed a lot this season. There's been a lot of criticism, I think, of Milos Kerkez recently, or throughout the season, I think unfairly, but just recently, I think people are starting to cotton on that there's a lot of potential with this kid. I like him. He'd kick his grandma pretty much, wouldn't he, at the same time? You know, he'll put himself about. Standing up to Dan Burn the other night, even though he only comes up to pretty much his knee. I like Milos Kerkez. I think people are starting to maybe recognise as too strong, but starting to get a bit of appreciation for him as well. Now, there has been a change in style a little bit. We've gone from coin flip FC to table tennis FC, as someone cottoned it the other day, a bit more end-to-end. And we've seen that a little bit in how we've opened up. Florian Wirtz back to the 10. But this was talked about as well by Arne, because he was asked about the defensive improvements around there. And he said, controlling a counter-attack is, of course, crucial. Now we have to find a perfect balance between creating enough chances to score and hardly conceding counter-attacks. We did very well against Newcastle. And shout out to Mighty Mojo, that clip I was playing earlier, around that balance he was asked. I think it was a good and fair question. We have got to get the balance right. We're still not strong enough, it's important to say, defensively. And that first half an hour against Newcastle could have gone very differently. Harvey Barnes hits the post. They do go 1-0 up. They did have a series of set pieces. They were the better team for half an hour. And almost Liverpool just decided at one point, we better turn it on. We better do the magic. But I am intrigued to see Wirtz in the 10 behind Ekitike, Gakpo, Salah wide. That seems to be what he's opted for more than anything in recent games. A bit of a removal from get all your midfielders on the pitch, make it a coin flip, be focused on not conceding and see if you can get a bit of magic. Will he adopt that approach against City? Something we're going to talk about very shortly. But it would have been remiss in the press conference from Journos and from Arne Slot if this man wasn't mentioned. Florian Wirtz. He was asked about him and he said he didn't improve that much on the ball because he's always been special, but he's now the connections with his teammates. Off the ball is the biggest improvement with him, and that combination makes you ready for the Premier League. And it's noticeable, if anyone clocked it today, Florian Wirtz has been nominated for the January Premier League Player of the Month award. And as Opta Analyst said today, in his first 21 games, he'd only got 3 goal contributions. And now I think we're running at 9 in 10, aren't we? Been on fire recently. I know Ekitike got the double. I'm not doubting that. But it was Florian Wirtz's dribble, wasn't it, to set it up. The nicely placed finish from Salah's assist as well. He's just operating at a different level at the moment. And talked about getting used to his teammates. I think they're maybe catching up to his football IQ somewhat a little bit. But off the ball. I think put 2.5 kilograms of muscle on, we know. Work really hard. Honestly, if you was not really sure we advertise betting on this channel, don't really know. But if, and this is an if, you fancy a little wager, Florian Wirtz for player of next year. That would be my wager. We shall see, eh? But those were the main highlights from the press conference, bar one more thing. And I didn't necessarily agree with this, but he was asked about Liverpool's recent form because, as people phrase it, you've only lost 1 in 16, but, you know, how many draws and different bits in there? Anyway, the football we play has been above acceptable, but the football in both boxes has not. I'm not sure the football between the boxes has been particularly above acceptable. I'm not sure I'd agree with that in terms of the speed of play, the progression, you know, passing it along the back, those types of things. Yes, we missed a few big chances. We could have done better on a number of goals. I wouldn't doubt that. But this just feels pivotal ahead of this weekend, doesn't it? As to how the season's starting to track. But we will talk about that very shortly. We always, as well, look back to the last game just gone. Newcastle 4-1 at home. Lessons from this? Maybe Liverpool are better opening up a bit and attacking at times. It's more fun than this coin flip FC and the dismal performances against the likes of Leeds, Sunderland, those that we've reviewed in recent times. So that's one of the key lessons for me. If Liverpool are going to have any joy before the end of the season, the other big lesson, Florian Wirtz and Hugo Ekitike are going to be absolutely central to it, like they were in this game. Ekitike now, for me, clearly, aside from Haaland, because the cyborg's just different, isn't he? The best attacker, best forward in the Premier League. Florian Wirtz should be January Player of the Month. Special. Anyone who doubted that this guy's a world-class talent is eating their words big time right now. So those two are going to be central as they were in this one. And then probably the other lesson learned that he doesn't want to play there. We don't really want him there. But Dominic Szoboszlai had a good game at right back, didn't he? A lot of progression, drove forward a lot. He won't particularly want to hear that. Not sure he wants Arne Slot to be recognising that either. But, yeah, there was a lot of decent performances. A 6-0 followed by a 4-1. I'd take anything as long as we end up the right side of it this weekend. But that's the big question, isn't it? Can we keep it going? And can we keep it going against Manchester City? Whatever people want to say about Manchester City, this is going to be a tough game. A lot of their players got rested the other night. Did anyone clock that at all? No Donnarumma, Gay couldn't play. Haaland had the night off as well. So they are well rested for this one. There was no hope of, not that we ever believed Newcastle would take them to extra time or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But we didn't quite get the... It's funny because Dan Burn's quite happy to go through the back of Cody Gakpo. If he could have applied the same nous to City players, but it was a damp squib. When you talk about these as well, there's a bit of Gattuso-ness about City, isn't there? Sometimes they're good. Sometimes we know what they are because they've lost 5 times this season. It's funny. They're the league's top scorers with 49, but they do ship 23 as well. And even if you look at their last 5, yeah, they've won, lost the Manchester derby, but drawn 3 of them. So they really have been in an up and down period. This is certainly not the City of old. But that being said, Haaland, that's enough to worry any defender, isn't it? So he's going to be a threat. Doku looks like he's injured, but Semenyo's there. He'll be a threat at the same time as well. Yeah. Now, the only real update, apart from Doku likely out, Pep said this in his press conference, didn't he? Or post the Newcastle game, sorry. Bernardo Silva is an incredible doubt for the Liverpool game on Sunday. However, rats multiply and heal quite easily, don't they? He'll be fine. You know, they'll stick him on the inhalers, the blood plasma, everything that they do there. It is what it is a little bit. We shall see, eh? But real threats, Haaland v VVD and Konate, that does feel like the big battle for this one. One thing I'd bet my money on is it ain't going to end goalless. Which, of course, brings us to lineup, score and scorers. Actually, again, I could be wrong on this, but you never know what might happen. I know Joe Gomez will be back in training, but you're not expecting him to be in the lineup. I don't actually think it's going to be any different from what you've seen against Qarabağ and Newcastle. I think Arne Slot, who talked about the other week, I do like to keep the same 11 players as often as possible. It's just not always been possible, to use his quote, is going to keep that way. So I think against City, you are going to see Alisson Becker in goal. VVD, Konate at centre-back, Milos Kerkez at left-back, and I have to jump to the midfield section for Dominic Szoboszlai to be right back. In the double pivot, I think you're going to see Alexis McAllister and Ryan Gravenberch. Which means up top, or start with the 10, Florian Wirtz behind Hugo Ekitike, Mo Salah right, Cody Gakpo left. That is genuinely what I'm expecting this weekend. And when you talk of alternatives, well, Curtis Jones will be on the bench, you think? And look at the way Arne Slot's just talked about him. Remember that line? Curtis Jones has been unlucky because of injuries. That's not screaming starting midfield, despite how well he's played. So he's an option. That's important. Joe Gomez looks like he should be an option at the same time. He's not going to start Chiesa. It's not a cup competition. Definitely not Manchester City at home. Endo, you know, you can name them all. Trey and Rio are going to be on the bench. But I can't really come up with any case or any belief that there will be a different starting team in this one. We shall see, eh? And in terms of score and scorers, I want to be wrong on this because my heart is telling me like, nah, we can win this. This is, you know, going a good run, all those types of things, yada, yada, yada. But genuinely right now, my head, my gut is telling me that actually bit of a dramatic build-up there, wasn't there? Sorry, just lost the camera for a minute. But my heart is telling me... My heart's telling me a 3-1 win. My head is telling me that it's going to be 1-1. I do fancy that. I just can't get it out of my head. 1-1. Not what we want at all. And Nikolai there going 4-0, Ekitike hat-trick. I think that is absolute dreamland. Wouldn't mind it at all. But in terms of Liverpool and, you know, what they've got to do, you've got to think about this. If we don't beat Manchester City, and you never know, nothing's certain, the smart money says Chelsea are going to pump Wolves. The smart money says that United are going to beat Spurs. I mean, look at Spurs. They're having rows. Romero's getting fined, isn't it? Which means the gap will have opened and there'll be serious pressure on this. And I don't know why 4-0 or 4 goals, Stephen there saying as well, seems popular. The pressure on Liverpool for this one is going to be absolutely through the roof. Will they respond? Genuinely, I hope so. Am I confident that they'll win? No. Definitely a bit more hopeful than we've been in recent weeks. But that's it for me. 1-1. Hugo Ekitike or Florian Wirtz to score. Probably, you know, one's giving the assist if they're not the scorer there. That is my honest prediction. We'll see, won't we? Florian Wirtz, Player of the Month nominee. Other sort of news going around today. We talked about Curtis Jones, the stories around Alexis McAllister and him being wanted, young Josh Abe, plenty going on. So I know Lewis had Daily Red earlier, so well worth a watch, well worth a download if you missed it. I know the Red Room was there the other night, so a full strapping cast, well worth a watch and download of that. And of course, there will be other bits. The only final thing to say, and a few journalists have mentioned this, there is an embargo. I just don't know if it's 10:30 tonight or it's 10:30 tomorrow. So one worth keeping an eye out for. No idea, of course, what's in it at this stage. No idea why this has been Thursday instead of the standard Friday. A few questions were asked. Is there an announcement? Is there something that's going to happen? Who knows? What we do know, Super Sunday, 4:30, City at Anfield. It will be rocking. Let's just hope it's 3 points and a hot walk for the way home. But Thursday, the 5th of February, that was another post-conference presser for Anfield Index.